In B2B, you don't sell to a person. You sell to a group of people, and if you only map one buyer, you lose to the invisible committee you never met. This lesson exists to make that committee visible. It only works, though, if you've already written your core problem statement from lesson 1. That sentence is what lets you figure out who actually cares enough to solve it, because without a named problem, you're just guessing at titles. If you haven't done that yet, grab your workbook and do that first. In this one, you'll list every real stakeholder from a deal you've actually closed, assign each of them a role and a concern, and name the stakeholder type you keep missing entirely. The decision-making unit is the full group of people who influence, decide on, and implement a B2B purchase, and it typically breaks into 4 roles. The economic buyer holds the budget and cares about ROI. The technical buyer evaluates the specs. The user champion will actually use the thing daily and cares about ease of use. And the coach is the person inside the company quietly rooting for you to win. In a complex sale, you need the real names behind these roles, along with their individual priorities, goals, and fears, not just the labels. First, a DMU is the whole group of people who make or influence a B2B buying decision, not just the one you've been emailing. Second, there are 4 core roles to know: economic buyer, technical buyer, user champion, and coach. Third, each of those roles has its own success criteria and its own pain points tied to your ICP. Fourth, a deal without a clear economic buyer is a deal that isn't going to close, no matter how good your champion is. And maybe most importantly, mapping the DMU isn't a one-time exercise, it's ongoing, deal by deal. The first is the stakeholder mapping canvas, a simple 2x2 or 3x3 grid that plots each stakeholder by how much influence they have and how much interest they're showing. Use it to decide who to prioritize and how to engage them. The second comes from Thomas Bonoma, and it breaks the DMU into 4 distinct roles: economic buyer, technical buyer, influencer, and gatekeeper. Once you know which role someone's actually playing, you can tailor how you talk to them instead of sending the same message to everyone in the deal. The biggest reason B2B sales cycles stall is a failure to map the decision-making unit. You think you're selling to Jill, but Jill is one voice on a committee you never met. This lesson forces you to name every stakeholder who has a real say in the purchase. And honest completion means actually talking to your existing customers and asking who was involved in their decision, not guessing from a couple of conversations you happen to have. By the end, the output for this lesson is your DMU map, a complete picture of the buying group, their roles, and what each of them actually cares about. Back in lesson 1, you wrote your core problem statement, the sentence that names the pain you solve. Now we're going to use that to figure out exactly who feels it enough to be part of a real buying decision. Grab your workbook, printed or otherwise, because you're about to write down actual names. Think of a recent deal you actually closed. List every single person from that buying organization who had any involvement, their title, and their perceived role. Don't clean it up. Write down who was actually in the room. Next, for each person on that list, assign them a DMU role: economic, technical, user, coach, and note their primary concern, like economic, needs a clear ROI within 12 months. Finally, look at a deal you lost. Who was part of that buying committee that you never identified or engaged? Add them to a missing stakeholders list. This is often where the real answer to a stalled deal is hiding. Here's your checklist. List every stakeholder from a recent closed-won deal. Assign each one a DMU role. Write down their primary concern. Identify one missing stakeholder from a deal you lost, and review the stakeholder mapping canvas to visualize who has the most influence. Together, these produce a complete decision-making unit map for a typical sale. And that map is the blueprint for the next lesson, where you'll design questions tailored to exactly what each of these people cares about. A fintech startup was selling a payment processing solution, and their whole sales motion was aimed at one person, the director of finance, on the assumption that they were the only decision maker. Deals were taking 6+ months, and 40% of them were dying at the final stage with no clear explanation. When they finally mapped the DMU, they discovered the CTO and a security team actually held veto power the finance team never had. They'd been invisible the entire time. Once the team started engaging the CTO and security earlier in the process, sales cycle length dropped by 40%, win rate rose 25%, and those unexplained late-stage losses disappeared entirely. Think back to that fintech story. In your last 3 lost deals, did you actually meet the economic buyer? The technical buyer? Name who was missing from those conversations. For your current top opportunity, who are the stakeholders you haven't engaged yet? Draft a one-sentence plan for reaching the most important missing one this week. And if you successfully map the DMU on your next 5 deals, what specific change would you expect to see in your forecast? Take a moment with that before continuing. The quickest shortcut here is mapping only titles, not agendas, and the cost is a list of names that isn't actually a tool for engagement. Real completion tends to come with an aha moment, when you realize exactly who you've been quietly ignoring. It feels less like an exercise and more like a blueprint for a genuinely complex sale. This DMU map is also the direct foundation for the questions you'll write in the next lesson. A complete map makes writing those questions almost automatic. Watch for the trap of assuming the economic buyer is whoever has the fanciest title. It's often a director with real budget, not the VP with none. And the real test of application. Can your sales team name the key stakeholder for every open opportunity, not just the favorites? Pause the video and open your workbook to the Lesson 2 worksheet. Under Stakeholder List, write each person's title and role for every individual who impacted the decision. For each one, note their DMU role and primary concern using the economic, technical, user, coach framework. Then under Overlooked Stakeholders, name a missing stakeholder from a lost deal and write down what you think they were actually worried about. If you don't have the printed workbook, your own notes work fine. What you write here is the direct input for crafting discovery questions in the next lesson. You'll write specific questions for each stakeholder to uncover exactly what they care about. Check these off as you complete them. First, DMU stakeholders listed. Check it once you've written down actual individuals from a real deal, not generic titles. Next, stakeholder roles and interests mapped. Check it once you've assigned a role and a primary concern to each person. And finally, check missing stakeholder identified. Once you've named a stakeholder type your process regularly overlooks. Once all 3 are checked, you've successfully mapped a typical decision-making unit. You can now see the invisible buying committee that used to be working against you. This one measures how well you're actually covering the DMU in practice, not just on paper. For win-loss analysis, look at your lost deals and calculate what percentage had a missing stakeholder you can now identify. For DMU size, check your CRM for the average number of stakeholders logged per deal. And for role coverage, count how many of the 3 key roles, economic, technical, user, you're actively engaging in a typical deal. A below benchmark number here isn't a personal failing. It's a discovery gap, and it's exactly what you'll start closing in the application section. Imagine you're sitting down with a new prospect, the VP of sales. Ask yourself, who else in this organization cares about solving this problem? Who might have veto power? Who would be hurt by a bad decision? Write down that list of roles. Now, for each one, imagine their objection. Why would the CTO say no? Why would the CFO say no? Pause and actually write these out. The question to sit with: are you selling to a person or to a committee? Take a moment and be honest with yourself. Is there a stakeholder role you systematically avoid engaging because you find them difficult to deal with? What is that avoidance costing your deal velocity? What would it actually take to change it? For deeper reading, look into stakeholder theory and how it applies to sales, along with the power/interest grid as a way to prioritize who you engage with first among a complex DMU. 3 things to do on your very next deal. Ask your champion directly to help you identify the other DMU members. Ask the prospect in your first conversation, who else will be involved in this decision? And go back and map the DMU on a deal you're currently working. Next time, we take this map of stakeholders and turn it into an actual question bank. Specific questions built for the CFO, the CTO, and everyone else you just identified.